Three foreign men entered Burkina Faso quietly, blending into the rhythm of the capital without drawing attention. They arrived separately. They booked rooms in different hotels. They moved through the city dressed like tourists, carrying sleek gadgets and wearing dark sunglasses at all hours, even indoors. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Visitors come and go. Business travelers pass through. The streets of Ouagadougou are used to strangers. But these men were not ordinary tourists. They approached young women in shopping malls, cafés, and around university campuses. Their tone was polite, their posture confident. They spoke about media projects and international exposure. They claimed to work with global digital platforms. They offered small payments for short interviews. Some women declined. Others listened. A few agreed, believing they were participating in harmless content creation. What the women did not know was this. Hidden inside the sunglasses were micro-cameras. Concealed inside power banks, pens, and backpacks were recording devices. Conversations were captured without consent. Faces were filmed from multiple angles. Private spaces were secretly documented. Back in their hotel rooms, the men reviewed footage. Files were sorted into folders labeled by city and location. Some clips were edited. Others were prepared for upload. Early digital traces suggested the content was being transferred to foreign servers. The operation might have continued unnoticed if not for one woman who sensed something was wrong. She reported that one of the men kept adjusting his glasses while she spoke. She noticed the lenses never shifted away from her face. She told authorities the men had insisted on filming in more private settings. Her report triggered a quiet investigation. Security forces began surveillance. Hotel staff were interviewed. Internet activity from specific rooms was analyzed. Patterns emerged quickly. Within days, the findings reached the desk of Ibrahim Traoré. He treated the matter as urgent. An emergency security meeting was called. According to officials present, his message was direct. The dignity of Burkinabe women was not negotiable. No visitor would be allowed to exploit trust for profit. Orders were issued. Monitoring intensified. Then came coordinated action. At dawn, security forces surrounded 2 hotels simultaneously. Doors were breached. Laptops were seized. Hidden devices were uncovered. Memory cards were collected as evidence. One suitcase contained recording tools disguised as everyday objects. Sunglasses with embedded lenses. Charging cables with internal cameras. A backpack wired for remote streaming. The 3 men were arrested on the spot. The following day, the suspects were presented publicly before formal prosecution procedures began. Their equipment was laid out in front of them. Rows of lenses, wires, hard drives. Evidence displayed without theatrics. Citizens watched in silence. This was not spectacle. It was a statement. When President Traoré entered the room where the suspects were being questioned, he did not raise his voice. He stood firm and composed. He asked a single question that set the tone. Who authorized this? At first, the men claimed independence. They described themselves as freelance digital creators. They insisted no force had been used. But investigators had already accessed their devices. Folders revealed dozens of secretly recorded videos. Chat logs showed discussions with overseas contacts about African content and subscription payments. Screenshots documented file transfers and revenue confirmations. When confronted with the evidence, one of the men admitted their method. Approach politely, offer small compensation, record discreetly, upload privately, sell access. The response from Traoré was measured but firm. Deception is also harm. News of the arrest spread rapidly across Ouagadougou. Women gathered outside the security compound. Some carried signs. Others stood quietly. The message among them was consistent. Respect is not optional. Inside the interrogation room, further discoveries deepened the case. The videos were not only uploaded. They were monetized. Private groups abroad paid for access. Subscription channels labeled with coded titles generated profit from hidden recordings of African women. Officers displayed each device one by one. Sunglasses, pens, portable routers, equipment configured for instant upload. This was not spontaneous misconduct. It was organized. Traoré announced that the suspects would face prosecution under national law. He ordered full digital forensic analysis of every device. He directed international cooperation to trace where the files had been sent. He made a public commitment. No woman on Burkinabe soil would be treated as content for sale. Outside, the atmosphere shifted from shock to resolve. What investigators uncovered next suggested the operation extended beyond 3 individuals. Payment trails pointed to foreign buyers. Travel histories showed short stays in multiple African countries. A checklist found on one device listed successful recordings by date and city. Under sustained questioning, one suspect broke down. We did not think it would become this serious. For Burkina Faso, it was serious from the start. That evening, President Traoré addressed the nation. His tone was steady. Burkina Faso welcomes guests, he said. But anyone who enters this country to exploit our people will answer to our laws. International cybercrime units began tracing distribution networks. Efforts were launched to remove the content. For the women affected, seeing action taken mattered deeply. In a quiet office, one of the victims watched coverage of the seized equipment displayed before the suspects. She exhaled slowly. They cannot hide now. The legal process moved forward. But the impact had already reshaped public awareness. Vigilance increased. Conversations about consent and digital exploitation spread through schools, markets, and homes. The case was no longer about three men. It had become about sovereignty, dignity, and protection. The courtroom in Ouagadougou filled before sunrise. There was no noise of celebration, no shouting, only quiet determination. Women sat in the front rows. Families stood along the walls. Journalists prepared their notes. Security officers monitored every entrance. The three accused men were brought in wearing handcuffs. No sunglasses, no confidence. Their recording devices now rested inside sealed evidence containers on the prosecutor's table. The judge called the session to order. Prosecutors began with facts, not emotion. They listed the charges clearly. Illegal secret recording, violation of privacy and dignity statutes, fraud through deception, cybercrime, unauthorized distribution of private material, financial exploitation. Screens displayed digital evidence recovered from the laptops. Telegram channels where videos were sold through subscription tiers. Payment confirmations linked to foreign accounts. Chat logs with buyers requesting more footage from West Africa. Edited clips with titles designed to attract paying audiences. A timeline appeared on the courtroom screen. It traced the men's travel patterns across the region. Short stays in Ghana. Brief visits to Kenya. Arrivals followed by recordings. Recordings followed by departure. Burkina Faso had interrupted the cycle. Statements from victims were read aloud. Some women chose anonymity. Others stood and spoke directly. One university student addressed the court with steady composure. She explained how she had trusted the promise of opportunity. She described the moment she learned the interview had been secretly recorded and sold. She spoke of humiliation, then of resolve. Seeing them here, she said, "I feel heard." Murmurs of support filled the room. The defendants were invited to respond. The first expressed regret. The second claimed cultural misunderstanding. The third avoided eye contact, speaking only briefly to say they had not anticipated the legal consequences. The prosecutor replied without raising his voice. Consequences do not begin when you are caught. They begin when you choose deception. Though he was not physically present in court, the influence of Ibrahim Traoré was evident in the speed and coordination of the investigation. International alerts had already been issued to remove content. Cybercrime partners were assisting in tracing payment routes. The hearing concluded with a clear directive. Full trial preparation. No bail. The defendants would remain in custody. Outside the courthouse, the reaction remained measured. Women embraced quietly. Some wiped tears. A young girl held a small sign that read, "My dignity is protected." As weeks passed, additional information surfaced. More women from other cities recognized similar tactics. Investigators uncovered supply chains for the recording equipment. Contacts abroad were identified. Distribution channels were mapped. The case widened. Cyber units collaborated with international agencies to dismantle online groups where the material had circulated. Accounts were frozen. Payment platforms were flagged. Archives were removed where possible. Not every file could be erased permanently, but the flow was disrupted. Meanwhile, discussions about digital safety spread nationwide. Schools organized awareness sessions. Universities issued advisories about hidden recording tactics. Community groups discussed consent and online exploitation openly. When the verdict day arrived months later, the courtroom was again filled. The judge's voice carried clearly. Guilty on all counts. Illegal secret recording. Violation of privacy. Fraud and deception. Unauthorized distribution of private material. Cyber-enabled exploitation for profit. Each man received a 12-year prison sentence, the maximum under strengthened national privacy and cybercrime laws. Financial penalties were imposed. Funds were directed toward national programs supporting victims of digital exploitation. One defendant asked through an interpreter whether deportation was possible instead of imprisonment. The judge responded calmly, "This is not a visa issue. This is a crime committed here. You will serve your sentence here." Outside, the reaction was steady but powerful. Women linked arms. Some smiled through tears. A banner near the courthouse entrance read, "Justice served. Dignity restored." Later that afternoon, President Traoré addressed the nation once more. His tone remained deliberate. "Today is not about revenge," he said. It is about consequence. Our country is open to visitors, but exploitation will meet law. He outlined structural changes already underway, expanded cyber defense training, awareness programs for hotel staff and university security, a national hotline for reporting hidden recording attempts, partnerships with African cyber experts to monitor exploitative networks. Diplomatic inquiries came quietly from abroad. The government's reply remained consistent. The courts have ruled. Our sovereignty stands. Gradually, the story faded from international headlines. But inside Burkina Faso, its impact endured. Women organized digital self-protection workshops. Students learned how to detect concealed devices. Market vendors were trained to report suspicious behavior. Families discussed vigilance at dinner tables. One evening, in a cafe near a university campus, the student who had testified in court sat with friends. She laughed at a joke, then paused thoughtfully. I used to feel small thinking about what happened, she said. Now I feel taller. Not because they are in prison, because we spoke, because someone listened. Across the country, a quiet shift had taken place. Not anger, not spectacle, awareness. The streets of Ouagadougou continued with music and movement. Markets remained lively. Life carried on. But beneath the rhythm was something stronger. A shared understanding. Dignity is not negotiable. Consent is not optional. Exploitation will not pass unnoticed. And the message that echoed beyond borders was simple. Africa protects its own. Months passed, but the case did not fade from memory. The sentences had been delivered. 12 years each. Fines directed toward victim support funds. Devices confiscated. Accounts frozen. Distribution channels disrupted. But the deeper shift inside Burkina Faso was still unfolding. In neighborhoods across Ouagadougou, conversations changed. Mothers spoke to daughters about digital traps. Not with fear, but with knowledge. University campuses introduced awareness briefings at orientation. Hotels trained staff to spot unusual equipment, suspicious behavior, and staged interviews. What began as a criminal case evolved into national vigilance. Inside government offices, new cyber monitoring units expanded their reach. Data analysts worked to identify patterns in suspicious uploads. Partnerships with regional African cybercrime experts strengthened cross-border alerts. Payment processors were flagged. Private subscription networks were watched more closely. The message was consistent. Exploitation would be traced. Monetization would be disrupted. President Ibrahim Traoré continued to frame the case not as a headline victory, but as a lesson. He spoke about sovereignty in the digital age, about dignity beyond physical borders, about how modern exploitation hides behind screens and devices rather than uniforms or weapons. In one address, he stated plainly, protection is not loud. It is constant. The impact rippled beyond Burkina Faso. Regional leaders quietly requested briefings on how the investigation was conducted. Cyber units from neighboring countries exchanged intelligence. The pattern uncovered in court revealed something larger than 3 individuals. It exposed a business model built on deception, mobility, and online anonymity. Burkina Faso had interrupted it. International observers noted how quickly evidence had been preserved, how coordination between hotel staff, security forces, and digital analysts prevented data destruction. What could have vanished into encrypted archives instead became courtroom proof. For the women involved, healing did not happen overnight. Some sought counseling. Some withdrew from public attention. Others chose activism. Support circles formed in community centers. Women shared experiences. They spoke about trust, manipulation, and recovery. What once felt isolating became collective strength. One of the women who had first reported the suspicious behavior later addressed a youth forum. She described the moment she noticed the glasses never moved away from her face. She described the doubt, then the decision to report. Courage often begins with discomfort, she told them. If something feels wrong, it deserves attention. Her words traveled across social media, not as spectacle, as guidance. Meanwhile, inside prison walls, the 3 men adjusted to reality. No cameras, no editing software, no anonymous buyers. Appeals were filed, but the legal foundation of the case remained firm. Diplomatic pressure lessened over time. International outlets moved on to other stories. Yet within Burkina Faso, the case became reference material in law schools and cybersecurity training sessions. Legal scholars studied how deception was classified as harm, how privacy statutes were applied to digital recording, how monetized distribution elevated charges beyond simple misconduct. The case shaped policy reform. Privacy protections were updated to address concealed devices explicitly. Cybercrime penalties were clarified for cross-border distribution. Reporting procedures were simplified to encourage faster alerts from citizens. And beyond policy, something intangible settled across the country. A sense that vigilance was shared. Women walked markets as they always had. Students gathered in cafés. Interviews and content creation did not stop. But awareness sharpened observation. Suspicious approaches were questioned. Credentials were verified. Offers were examined before accepted. Life remained open, but not naive. In a later national broadcast, President Traoré summarized the lasting lesson. This was never only about punishment, he said. It was about prevention. It was about sending a signal that dignity travels with our people everywhere. The story of 3 hidden cameras had transformed into a broader statement about digital sovereignty. Years later, when the case was referenced in public discussion, it was not described as scandal. It was described as turning point, a moment when trust was defended, a moment when law moved faster than exploitation, a moment when women stood, spoke, and were answered. And in the busy streets of Ouagadougou, under bright sun and steady music, the promise remained quiet but firm. Respect is not requested. It is required.